From the studio that has won no awards whatsoever comes the podcast that should have already been canceled. Welcome to another episode of Have You Read This? A podcast for bookworms, lovers of sarcasm, and those dangerously close to overdosing on caffeine. Load up on ibuprofen, because here comes 15 minutes of your life you'll never be able to get back.
Been a little slacking here on some of the episodes. Not that anybody cares. In case you do, I have some type of virus that has caused me to cough constantly, like every 3 minutes. And that increases when I try to go to sleep, which means I haven't been sleeping, which means I'm even more grumpy than I normally am, which I know is kind of hard to believe because I'm really grumpy in general. Before I get into the book, I want to mention a milestone for me, which was finally rolling over 500 subscribers on YouTube. And that seems like such a small number, especially when you see all these other accounts that have, thousands and thousands of followers. And you go to my Instagram account and you look and like, oh, it's like 170. Like, why should I care about this guy? Some of these accounts even have that fancy, that YouTube plaque in the background of their videos, which really, to me, it's kind of a subtle flex, and I'm jealous. I might have more followers if I was the type of influencer who did that whole thing, like, come with me as I do something basic at Barnes and Noble. If I did that kind of thing, but really, I'm just too old for that. So this is what you get. And I wasn't going to mention anything about going over 500, but it's a big deal for me, especially since everything that I'm doing right now is organic. I'm not paying for ads. I'm not doing any crap like that. In order to monetize your channel, for those that don't know, you need a certain number of followers, and you also have to have a specific amount of watch time. I've struggled with this 500 subscriber thing to the point where I just stopped looking at it. I didn't care. And I hit that watch time goal like a while back. Subscribers, not so much. So when I finally saw it tick over 500, I was pretty excited. Took all kind of screenshots and stuff. Like, I don't know who I'm going to share that with. But anyway, I know 500 isn't something that anybody really cares about. I think a lot of these influencers would probably laugh at it. But here's how I look at it. If I walked into a room and there were 500 people waiting for me to talk, I think I'd probably be overwhelmed. So yeah, I'm going to take the time to celebrate this milestone a little bit because it means a lot to me. On to the book. So I wanted to talk a little bit about an example of the TikTok algorithm actually working. If only the other social platforms did this instead of showing me the same pointless sponsored ad every 4 posts, those platforms might be a little bit more enjoyable. It's also a great example of why you authors out there, I would encourage you to keep continually sharing your work online because it will reach the right audience. Came across the account Tails and Ink on TikTok a little while ago, and it was one of the few that stopped me from scrolling. I ended up reading more of his poems than I can remember. And I don't know what it was. Is like the first thing that pops up is like there's this really, I don't know, dark, but like a solitude kind of image and some pretty sad, dramatic kind of music playing in the background. Then when you scroll, you get to the poem, and I don't know. I just found a deep connection to so much of what I was reading. It's odd in some ways, as the poems, they weren't specifically about my life, and there were a lot of them really that I couldn't relate to, but the weight of them, and they were just so powerful. I think that's what I was drawn in by. The author, Loan Wendling. This is not someone you'll find loads of information about online either. And I thought I might find some interviews or some other accounts talking about him, but really wasn't the case. I ended up kind of leaning on what he provided on Goodreads or Amazon or just, his whole write-up kind of thing. And I thought it was kind of worth repeating. So what he said on Goodreads was this.
Loan Wendling has lived an odd life, to say the least. He has been forged by poverty and poetry, exclusion and excess, emptiness and euphoria, life's highest highs, as well as its lowest lows. He spent his early childhood in the cold, of some old forgotten town in Europe, to then drown in the warmth of the mountains and beaches of a small island nestled in the Indian Ocean called Mauritius. Witnessed the beauty of the Himalayas, and he is now a student in the beautifully peaceful town of Sydney, Nova Scotia, a place lost in time, which is where he spends his time writing, dreaming, and building.
And then specifically about Tales in Ink, which is the book that I just bought, he goes on to add the following.
This collection contains poems with themes ranging from loneliness, fatherhood, manhood, to themes such as wrath and hatred for the divine. It's also a travel diary from 2024, recounting the author's most life-changing trip, a peek into a sacred moment about the road and its beauty.
So this book, it's only 118 pages, and it covers just what he says. He wrestles with being lonely and his relationship with his father, what it means to be a man, and faith. And there's also a section toward the end with longer format poems that come in terms of a travel diary. And I don't want to read all of his work here. I take that back. I would love nothing more than to share so much of what he's written. But point here isn't that. The point here is for you to go grab this book. But I did want to include something in this episode. And I think that was difficult at best because there was a lot of these things that I like I said, I felt a pretty deep connection to. But one of the many poems that stood out was this one. And this one's titled A Man Dies.
A man doesn't die when he jumps, or bleeds, or swallows the bottle whole. He dies, staring at a dinner made for one. He dies, in grocery aisles staring too long at things meant for two. He dies, when his hours are worth 15 each, and nothing else matters, other than his vices and his beers. He dies, waiting for a mother's hug and a father's smile. He dies, hoping and longing for a fleeting memory of a fading warmth. He dies, waiting for love, not knowing he could have given some to himself.
So I would say I'm relatively new to reading poetry. I found some collections that I imagine would fall under the classic category, and they didn't really do much for me. In that aspect, poetry really isn't any different than just reading novels in general. You have to find what moves you and what you connect with, and that might not be everything. That's not going to be everything. Wendling's work might not resonate with you. And you know what? That's okay. There were some poems that absolutely leveled me. And that is just about the only way that I feel like I can describe it. And the more I've read poetry, especially stuff like this, the more I admire it, simply due to the extreme personal nature of it. So much of Wendling's work feels like his emotions laid bare, poured out for others to see, taking raw feelings from the safety of the dark and moving them into the light. Sharing them with the world can be horribly terrifying or maybe even incredibly freeing. And I would imagine on some levels, it's probably both. I have started to write poetry. Okay, well, let me back up. Let me back up just a second. I should probably say I have attempted to write poetry, which really means I have 2 poems that most likely will never see the light of day. Maybe I'm just a coward in that aspect. I think it's one thing to write poetry that you know nobody else is going to read. And it's an entirely different animal to record deeply personal accounts and then later opening a door for the entire world to come in and not only just read it, but also have the ability to rate it on platforms like Goodreads. I think it's brave. of authors to release their works for this reason. I mean, where else can you say, like, here's this deeply personal poem about my life or some struggle that I went through, and then some moron on Goodreads is like, wow, this is a 2-star read. I can't stand this guy. Like, I don't know. It's brave to put yourself out there like that. Tales in Ink was a 5-star read for me. Wendling's words, they still resonate with me. And in the copy that I have, I'll occasionally go back and read some of the poems, some of the stuff that I have annotated, because I just like keeping that connection with those emotions. And I love when his work pops up on TikTok, and it's probably one of the very few accounts where I'll stop and read everything. Like, I have the patience for that account. And if poetry, that might not be your thing. And I get that. It wasn't my thing. I still kind of wonder, is it my thing, or if I'm just like dipping my toe in the water, or like, am I in the deep end of the pool now? I don't know. I would just encourage you to give this one a try and see how you feel after reading it. So right now, I say about halfway through reading a book called Paper Roses by Debbie Show, which she was kind enough to not only send me, but autograph. And then after that, I have no idea what I want to read. I mean, it's not like I have this massive shelf here full of stuff I haven't read yet, but if you're a reader, you'll understand this. The person that bought some of those books is a different person than I am right now. And I think that's my toxic trait. Well, maybe one of 1,000 toxic traits, but I will buy books and I'll be excited to read them. And when I finish the current book that I'm on, I'm like, well, I'm just not in the mood to read that thing. I need something totally different now. So I'm hoping that I'm not the only one that struggles with this. However, my goal with this book is to set up some time to get Debbie on the podcast and talk about Paper Roses, which a lot of this was inspired by a true story. So it's going to be really intriguing and really exciting to talk through that. And then beyond that, who the hell knows what will happen? Maybe this sickness will take me out. This could be the last episode. We just never know. You'll just have to stay tuned and find out if I'm dead or not.
I hope the Xanax lasted you through all of that nonsense. Since you are still here, it would give my undies a tingle if you drop a 5-star review. Follow Have You Read This podcast on Instagram, or I will beat you to death with my walker. Now get me out of here and get me my back pills.